Hello everyone, Kent.Bressler here. I want to welcome you to Kent's Kidney Stories. During our time together over these podcasts, I'd like to discuss kidney disease. I'd like to tell you about my journey as a transplant patient, but also talk about dialysis, kidney donation, and just about anything else that might be of interest. Kent's Kidney Stories, a podcast endorsed and sponsored by kidneysolutions.org.
Hello, everyone. This is Kent.Bressler. We're going to do some podcasting. It's afternoon in beautiful downtown Kerrville, Texas. And it's also 103. So there you go. Take that to the bank. I want to start. I've got a really great guest today, good friend of mine from DC. And she did a very unique thing. I still don't know why, but we're going to find out. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about donating kidneys and how NKF works their magic with that, and in general, how you could donate if you really wanted to. And we really want you to. So let's pray. Precious Savior, another day is here, and we commit ourselves and families, our friends, and all your children to your care. Relieve those who are suffering, and those who are sick, and those who have endured a loss. Be with the lonely, the troubled, and the downhearted. And forgive those who ask for their forgiveness, watching over all of us and blessing us. And we ask that you do all of this in your holy name. Amen. So I wanted just to focus a little bit on being a living donor. I had a really great podcast yesterday that'll be coming out with an individual who was unable to donate, but today I've got one that did. So we're going to talk about that. You know, there are two types of kidney transplants. There's deceased donors and there's living donors. Can't do it any other way. And you know, you can donate part of your liver, but in this particular case, we're going to concentrate on kidneys. And we've got 90,000 people. Yes, that's 90,000, 90K people on a waiting list for a kidney transplant. And 100,000 people are removed from that kidney transplant waiting list, we call it, each year, either due to becoming way too ill or ill for a transplant, or actually due to death. Live donor kidney transplants provide superior outcomes and survival benefits relative to a decreased donor transplant, yet living donor transplants have decreased in the past few years. That's monumental. Decreased, not increased. You'd think with an increasing population and a need that it would. Well, it hasn't. Of 90,000 candidates listed for a kidney transplant in the U.S., now get this, only 25,000 of those 90,000, 25,549 to be exact, received a transplant in 2022. So waiting on a transplant list for a deceased donor can vary from state to state, and it does vary. And the wait can be anywhere from 2 years to 10 years. That's for a deceased donor kidney transplant. Could you imagine waiting? I had a good one of our patients that waited 11 years and was transplanted after 11 years on dialysis. One tough cookie. Okay, now this is an interesting statistic for you. Not everyone survives the wait. Somewhere between 11 and 13 people will die every day. That's every day waiting for a kidney. So what I want to do is I want to bring in a really great friend of mine from the National. I'm laughing because she's smiling. She looks great. I just wish everybody could see her. She's just got a big old smile on, and we're gonna we're gonna have some good times today. I want to introduce Lauren Drew. She's the director of congressional relations with the National Kidney Foundation in Washington, D.C. And she's graced our presence since 2020 when she signed on. She does a wonderful job. I've have experience with her as I've got a representative in my district who's pretty tough, trying to get him to co-sponsor the living donor bill. As you know, in Texas, we have quite a few guys and gals that are not signed up to be co-sponsors of this wonderful bill. And we've also been chasing this bill for over 10 years. The point being, I wanted to introduce Lauren because of her, not only her background, but what she did here just recently. And we're going to talk to her about it. Lauren, how are you?
Oh, Mr. Bressler, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This is a joy. I am doing well.
With Kidney Solutions, you know, we spend an awful lot of time working directly with the patients and focusing on them. And then I get to talk to people. Our membership in this organization, as far as the podcast, has grown pretty well. I'm very happy about it. But having people on like you makes a big difference. And I'll tell you why. Because not very many people know what it's like to do what you did or to do what I had done to me. Kidney disease is nasty. Just to say the least, living donation probably is something that needs to really be stressed. Not very many people know about living donation. They don't even realize that you can function and operate with one kidney. So now I know, I was told that you actually did donate one of your kidneys. Is that correct?
I did over Memorial Day weekend. I had my surgery on early Thursday morning. I spent one night in the hospital and I was home by Friday evening and then recuperating over Memorial Day weekend.
One night. You know, when my brother
Yeah.
when he donated to me 36 years ago, they did a procedure called a ventral incision. In other words, from the front to the back. And then they took a rib and a half out to get to his kidney. How did you like doing that?
Mine was not that involved. I had a very easy laparoscopic surgery. I have 3 tiny little scars right around my belly button. And it was, I've been telling everyone, if my kidneys regenerated, I would do it again in a heartbeat. It really was not nearly as, I had an emergency appendectomy when I was younger. And I would say that was a lot more difficult than donating a kidney.
Yeah. I can remember him walking into my room, Lauren. It was like, I think on day 3. And I'd been up walking, and I was kicking. I was wanting to get out of there. And he walked in and he looked forlorn. He looked bad. he was hurting. And he looked at me and he said, and I will quote, "What in the hell did you get me into?"
And well, that's the difference, right? Of the person who's sick, who gets the transplant. I mean, they're coming from a place where they're already feeling bad. So when that transplant kicks in, they start feeling really good. Those
instantly.
of us who go in to donate, we go in feeling great. And I was lucky. I was up walking again by Friday. Obviously, I went right home, but takes a little time. Your body, you donated an organ, you have to rest. But thankfully for me, the recovery was real easy.
So I know why he did what he did for me. Why did you decide, and kind of tell me what in your heart, what possessed you?
You're not the only person to ask me that. My parents asked me that too. So I was a non-directed donor. I do not know where my kidney went. I believe it went to someone maybe up in the Boston area, but I don't know. I have not had any contact, although I would certainly be open to it. And honestly, I was first moved, obviously. So as part of my job, I get to meet all the wonderful patients and on our kidney advocacy committee. And so I've met a lot of recipients and donors. And so hearing those stories, you really realize what a difference you can make in someone's life. And then one of our other NKF staffers, Miriam Godwin, she donated in 2021, and she and I are good friends. So I watched her go through that process of recovery. And so she kind of became my donation Sherpa. And when I started thinking about it, I talked to her. I talked to several of our other patients who had been living donors. And I guess the thing that really pushed me over the edge was, as a part of my job as a lobbyist for NKF, I talked to Congress about the Living Donor Protection Act, about kidney disease in general. And so I say every day, 17 people are dying every day waiting for an organ. 13 of them are waiting for a kidney. I know the numbers by heart. I recite them every day. And so it becomes an issue of like, I know too much not to do something. I have been given this information. What are you going to do with it? And I was also very lucky, right? I have a job, obviously, that supports me. I took multiple weeks off, and obviously NKF is super supportive. I have a supportive family, supportive partner. I live very close to a transplant center. I am about 20 minutes away from Georgetown MedStar Transplant Center, so that was very easy. I was just in that sweet spot of this would not be hard for me to do, and I know too much not to do it.
Any second thoughts?
I would do it again in a heartbeat. If my kidneys regenerated, I would totally do it again. It was actually easier than I thought it was going to be. I was bracing for a much longer recovery, but I was up and terrorizing my partner within like 2 weeks. I was walking the dog and out puttering around in the garden, and I was very lucky. Nice, quick recovery. It did take me about a month before I was cleared for exercise. But I'm now back in the pool. I'm back hiking. Nowadays I sometimes even forgot that I did it because I don't feel any different.
I think that's what a lot of people will say. Once they've done it, some of them, there are complications to this. We don't want to forget that. Yeah. There can be some complications, especially perforated bowel, bleeding, and just several things can happen. Of course, they go over those with you. They tell you that. They don't hold anything back. And so what I like
part when you're doing this evaluation is they are so careful about, they give you every out. They give you they're like, here's all the information. If at any moment you don't want to do this, cool, walk away. No problem. Yep. And they literally, right up until they will you in, you can say, never mind, I don't want to do it. And they're like, fine, totally okay. So they really give you all the information multiple times in multiple different forms and methods of learning. And they absolutely have your back whenever if you need to defer, if you're like, oh, I'm not ready right now, but maybe later, or you know what, I've changed my mind, I can't do this. They really have your back and support you as the donor.
That was a hospital thing, a transplant program thing that had your back, correct? You didn't have, well, of course, you had your mentor too. You had,
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that makes it so easy for someone like me to donate is I know so many other people who have done it.
Right.
And once you start digging, you might be surprised, you, the person out there listening to this, you may be surprised to how many people in your orbit have done it too. And maybe they just don't talk about it because they go on with their life, and most people don't have complications. And we don't really brag about it. It's just something we did, and we hope that the recipient is out there doing well.
Yeah, see, that's another thing too. When you do it indirect, like you did, you don't know, and you probably won't know is there an opportunity for you to know who it went to?
You can say that you're open to communicating, and I definitely am, but it's up to that patient. The patient might not want to, or they might not be ready right now. But you can, and you can also say, you know what, I'm sending my kidney out into the universe and I don't need to know. So
Right.
it really depends on the person and what their preferences are.
You can change over the years, though, at some point in time.
Mhm.
And at any time, and what you do is, in what our experience has been, is to take people back to the transplant program, and either social worker or priest or whoever will contact via letter. Usually, you can write a letter to the family, and they will have
Mhm.
that delivered to them without you knowing. I have had experiences here with our practice that we've had families come in and meet. So
Oh, that's
it's
great.
very um, it tugs on your heartstrings when this happens, because you stand off and watch these people, and especially with a deceased donor, of course, that's the only time it would happen. But a deceased donor family comes up and says, I would, I want to meet, I want to meet the person who got the organs. And that's multiple organs too, right? So like,
Mhm.
can be kidneys and can be eyes, and there's always an opportunity to approach it, but it doesn't always happen. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a personal preference, like you said.
Mhm.
I was wondering, what is it that you think of right now? Does it ever come to your mind, what I'm doing, is it how important it is to you to have done this? Thinking it's kind of a tough question. It's kind of like a personal question to you. How does it make you feel?
Yeah, I have been asked this before, and the way I try to explain it is, I'm not a particularly religious person, but I do very much believe that we are put here to do good and that we should do good whenever we can. And so for me, it's just kind of like, all right, that was good. And I'm glad, and I really hope that the recipient is feeling well and that they're able to go out there and do good. And like, it's kind of that ripple effect. Like you do a good thing and you hope that it continues to inspire and help other people do good things. And then that's how we make the world better.
What a great segue. How do we get more people to do what you did? In all honesty,
Yeah, I
that's
mean, I
really the
guess it is
key.
about talking about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a
So
matter
what
of,
you do with your podcast and Kidney Solutions is essential. And I would also say for anyone listening who's thinking about it, is talk to people, find us, find people who have done it, find families who have been touched by donation, and you'll one, if you do go through with it, you'll become part of a wonderful family of people who do this, and they're all really wonderful and amazing, and it does create a ripple effect of goodness in the world. But it really does start with talking about it and asking questions and not being afraid to ask about someone's experience, or ask, if there's someone in your family who is, suffering with a disease that could be helped by transplant, to ask that person if that's something they've thought about. Because I've
sure.
also heard from patients that they're like, oh, I don't want to ask anyone in my family to donate to me. I don't want to ask a stranger to donate to me. Like they don't feel worthy, or they don't think like they wouldn't want to put someone in that position. But I was telling this to someone else, I'm like, it's almost not the role of the recipient to worry about that. It's the donor who needs to decide to make that choice. And the recipient is just giving the donor a chance to do something good by letting them know that there's an opportunity. It's not pressure. It's not, oh, I'm not worthy. Oh, I wouldn't want to ask someone to do that. It's you're just giving someone an opportunity to do good in the world. And hopefully someone, steps into that role. But I just encourage all the patients to whom this might be an opportunity to at least think about it, at least explore it.
Yeah, like you said, explore. I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking questions, because you're going to get asked a lot of questions about your well-being. And I might add, this is really important for people who are listening. If you're going to be a donor, if that decision's been made, just remember that you're going to be getting one of the well, world-class exam, lab
Oh yeah.
work, and every world class. And the reason for that is they do not want, they being the transplant surgeon and the team, they don't want to jeopardize your life by taking an organ like a kidney out. And that can happen. That's why it's so stringent. That's why it's so tough. And so once you've graduated through that, you can pretty well rest assured you're in pretty darn good health.
That is a really great point. And that's something that I would tell people is, one, if you're afraid of being a donor because you don't think you'll be accepted, one, do it anyway. Do it, like, go through the evaluation. They will
Absolutely.
either clear you, or if they find something, they will tell you how to fix it. They will be like, oh, you know what? We need to get your blood pressure under control before you do this. Here's how we can do this. Oh, you know what? Your cholesterol is a little, let's get on a plan. And just because one center says you're not the right donor for us right now doesn't mean you can't try somewhere else. Because I do know people who,
Yes. Yes.
they had a special medical situation and they just had to find a different hospital that could handle it. And then they were able to be a donor. But it does feel really good when you come out of your donor evaluation and they're like, you're good to go, because that means you're like one of the 1% most healthiest people.
Yeah, really. I mean, you get a world-class exam, and there's nothing better than a donor exam. And,
They check
most
every
people,
nook and cranny twice.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And they push tubes up everywhere, and nothing left unturned. And then there's still the psychological
I will tell
part
the
of it.
funny story.
Yeah.
I will tell the funny story if people don't know about, you have to do a 24-hour urine collection because they want to make sure your kidneys are functioning really well before they take one out.
Right.
And my boyfriend didn't really know what that was. And we only have one bathroom in our tiny little townhouse in the city. And he's like, oh, is there did you leave like cleaning supplies? Like, there's this big container next to the toilet. Like, what is this? And I was like, that's full of pee. Don't touch it.
And it's got to go in tomorrow.
Because you do have to collect it. And then you have to bring it in, which in the city means riding in a taxi with a giant container full of pee, which is probably the most embarrassing thing that happens during your donor evaluation. But all of us who have been there kind of look at each other and laugh because we all know that we all had to do it.
I'll tell you, just before the transplant, before my brother, we were both in the same room for some reason. And he had to do a 24-hour urine prior to, and I'd already done mine. So after it was all said and done, the next morning, we're getting ready to go. I mean, like, we're going to be approved right then and there. And they come in and said, well, Kip's got protein in his urine. And my brother, and Dr. Mulgrew walked in and had heard that when the surgeons say that. And he said, that's baloney. This kid doesn't have any. The kid Kent has the kidney disease. I guarantee you that. Let's pull another urine and let's do it for 12 more hours. We'll keep them 12 more hours. Let's do a 12-hour urine sample. I guarantee you there won't be any protein. Well, guess what had happened? One of the aides, or the nurses, somebody had come in and put my urine in his. Bingo. Right? And they just put instead, yeah. And so my protein in my urine was running 4+ max, and they dumped it in there, and all of a sudden he had protein in his urine, which is an indicator of kidney disease. Well, so there's lots of things that can happen. Let's slide over. I'm so happy you did this. When I heard about it, I thought, podcast, we're going to talk to her. And I get to thinking, rolling in this idea of protection of the donor. We've been chasing the Living Donor Protection Act. It escapes me the number and all that kind of stuff, what it is. It's in the House. People co-sponsor it. The point is, what is the advantage of having that type of protection? Did you feel any pressure that you might not be protected as a donor?
So I'm very lucky in terms of the health insurance I have. I live in the District of Columbia, so I am the beneficiary of all the protections and all the support. However, the Living Donor Protection Act on the state level only exists in 31 states. We are actively working to improve that, and there is not one at the federal level. And I'm sure you've talked about on the podcast before, but as a review, the Living Donor Protection Act is a bill that protects living donors again from discrimination in life insurance, disability insurance, and long-term care insurance. So that's, a living donor can't get dropped. They can't have their rates triple just because they have become an organ donor. And that's because, as we said, you got to be so healthy to even be approved. So we are working this bill on the federal level as well as on the state level. And on the federal level, it also has Family and Medical Leave Act implications. So that protects people's jobs when they have to have, like it says, family or medical leave. A lot of times people think about it for pregnancy, but it's also if you need to be a caregiver for someone in your family. And our federal Living Donor Protection Act would include donation and recovery from donation as a qualifying experience to get you those job protections that come under the Family and Medical Leave Act. And that's particularly important for someone who maybe they are a gig worker or they're an hourly employee or they don't have, the kind of protections that some other people have with very generous leave, very generous benefits. And a lot of people don't have that.
No, they don't.
So making sure they have that protection under the federal Family Medical and Leave Act would ensure that it's not just, rich, wealthy, white collar people who can do this, but also, anyone who living in any circumstance or with any kind of career would be able to have those protections.
Another thing too that act would do, it would just give you peace of mind, knowing going in. But people still do it. You did it, and although other people say, well, how long am I gonna be off, and how much, when can I start lifting?
And I was lucky that I didn't have to worry about that because NKF has a very generous policy towards anyone who wants to be a living donor. And some companies do. So some companies have done it on their own. And they are part of what we call our circle of excellence. Those are companies and some governments, some state governments, and the federal government that have said, okay, our direct employees, like we're going to cover, I think it's up to 4 weeks of leave to make sure they can do this and know that their job is safe. But again, not everyone has the benefit of living somewhere or working for someone that has that. So making sure they would at least be eligible for the FMLA protection is really important on the federal level.
I think it's probably best at this point to say, how do you get that word out on getting this approved? Because we've been chasing this. We've
been chasing this bill for a long time.
Yeah. 15 years
and,
that I know of.
The good part is just because it is stalled at the federal level, we're still working on the state level. So we've gone from 27 states to 31 states in the last year. We're going to keep working and maybe we'll get all 50 states before we get the federal one. And then we'll just have to focus on the FMLA provision because that can only be done at the federal level.
Right.
But, you got to call your member of Congress. You got to talk to anyone who's running for your Congress, Senate, House, and make sure they know that there are people in their district who would benefit and who support this bill. There's definitely stuff behind the scenes that NKF is working on, committee stuff and the process that goes on behind the scenes. But the best way to get attention to the bill is that people need to hear from their constituents that it's what people on the ground want.
That's right. And the most important thing is that you got to keep beating the path. You can't just do it one time and say, okay, well, I did it.
No.
You're talking about one time in is not one time remembered. So it's at some point in time prior to and after the summit, I always start 2 months early. I start calling every week. And then I expect to call back. Now, when you call your representative, right, you expect them to respond to you. And then they tell you, well, here's his email. And you say, no, I want to talk to him. All right.
Mhm.
You have an opportunity to talk to your real representative. It makes a difference. And you can get it done if you keep on. They'll do it virtually. You just have to make sure that you get in with the right person. That's usually the legislative aid. And that legislative aid can set that up. But you can't quit. And then you just get right to the point with them. We're looking for you to co-sponsor it. And then you work from there.
And if they haven't co-sponsor, you ask them why.
Yeah.
Why?
You know,
What's your
what is it?
concern? What
Yep.
what are your issues with the bill? And then that's when you can kick it to us over at NKF, and we can try to answer their questions, or we find out that they don't actually have any concerns and they're just dragging their feet, in which case
That's
we just
right.
bother them more
That's right.
and make sure that they do what their constituents are asking them to do. The other thing I would say is make sure you're running into your member of Congress, especially we're recording this podcast in August. That's when a lot of members are back in the district. They're doing town halls. They're going to the Labor Day parade. They're out in the community. And you don't have to come up to them with 10 minutes of talking points, but you can just be like, hey, Congressman Smith, I called your office last week about LDPA. Like, talk to you soon about it. It can be very quick. You just want to make sure they remember that this is an issue that they're supposed to be working on.
They always have a click with them. I call a click someone who's, representative's aide. There's always an aide with them that's traveling with them. You can pass the literature to them and say, hey, let's make sure you get this briefed. Get it briefed, and then when you're done, give me a call. And if you need me to help you, I'd be more than happy to do a virtual conference with them. And you just have to be real pushy, and that's just it. That's how you have to stay with it. Okay, Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, our issues, we're very lucky that our issues are bipartisan. So it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter who your member of Congress is. Kidney disease doesn't care, red, blue, independent, whatever you might be. Just the more we talk about it, members of Congress are handling 100 different issues, all the different things they're getting approached about. So the more we can just, politely but persistently remind them that this is important.
Well, it is important. A lot of people dying out here. A lot of people, and it's costing the federal government a lot of money to operate.
And it's also on, I think, it's on those of us who are healthy. That's why a lot of donors do become advocates, because patients are ill. Patients are dealing with what it's like to have a chronic illness, and they're not always going to be able to advocate or get out there to the town halls or get these meetings. And some of them do. God bless y'all that do, like, on top of dealing with this illness, you still also are an advocate. But a lot of patients can't. So I personally think it's also on those of us who do have the capacity and do have, our health and maybe some flexibility in our schedules to be able to speak up for those who can't.
I can tell you over the years that I've done this, and I've been with NKF for a long time, and every time I want to start really hitting it for a while, I pick the phone up. The phone is still your best. They screen everything, but then the request is, once you get into the office, you say, I would really like to talk to my representative. I live in this district, and I pay taxes in this district, and I expect some at least important part of this whole process ought to be coming from your end, so you can set it up for me. You're not going to pick up the phone and get your representative on the phone right away. It's not going to happen unless he's fired everybody and he's answering the phones, or she. But then that's not going to happen up there. Anyway, you just have to be very persistent. That enough said. And I think this whole process now that we've talked about here, it's a matter of, do you want to do this living donor business personally? If you do, then you got to, you just go ahead and step up. And if you can call National Kidney Foundation, you can call Kidney Solutions. We will, if you're interested in becoming a donor, a living donor, we have people who've done it. I know that if I have someone call me and they say, I'd like to have some questions answered, I can easily call Lauren Drew and drop a phone number, and I know, because once you're in this family, and it is a family, all right. Once you're a kidney warrior, once you've been either a donor or a recipient, whether you've kept your kidney or you've had difficulties with it, makes no difference. Once you've done that, you're special. And I'll tell you why. because if you haven't experienced it, you'll never understand it. It's an understanding that is, it's in your heart, all right? Not your kidney, it's in your heart. And you'll know exactly what it means to give a kidney, save a life, and you'll also know what it is to receive a kidney and have a life. So I think we're at a point here where it's okay to quit. I'm going to have you back on. I'm going to have a couple donors and a couple of recipients and on a panel, and you're going to be one of them. I don't know if you knew that, but you
I would
do
love
now.
that. I would love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank
Yeah.
you so much for what you do. Like, the more people out there talking about this, the more people we can reach. And
Is
like I
there,
said before, if I can just finish with that thought of like, do that one small good thing and
yeah,
create the ripples. And if donation is not something you can do, that's okay. You can call your member of Congress. You can
yeah.
write a letter. There's all kinds of ways to just do that one small good thing and start the ripple effect.
Think about the 13. I think about the 13 that die each day. But what I think about more, in all honesty, Lauren, is looking back to see who's coming. 30 million people don't even know they got this disease, and they're shocked when they find out. And if you look back and see what you can do for those that are coming, you've done a good deed. So you just because you get a transplant, just because you donate, you got to keep going. You have to be a warrior. You have to look back and say, come on, I got your back. And then it'll all work off. Yeah, everybody will keep going.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to have you back. You're hooked. Anyway, folks,
yeah,
listen.
happy to.
We're going to do this. I just want to tell everybody, these things become more and more important to me in where I'm at in life. And I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't believe that kidney disease is nasty. I don't know of anybody that enjoys having it. I just don't. And I've talked to thousands of people. I will tell you one thing. We live to live. We don't live to exist. And a transplant allows you to live. All right. It is better. A living donor, any donor, is better than dialysis. I'll just have to be honest. Understood that most people don't understand that. Some people just have to be on dialysis. I get that. But if you have
My
an
uncle will never qualify for transplant.
That's right. And a lot of people don't. But can you donate? I'll bet you can. And if you can't, then we'll hug you for it. You're just as important as the person who doesn't try. But if you give it a try and you do, more power to you. And if you don't, we're hugging you. All right. That's it. And everybody out there, keep breathing.